Okay. Hey, Algebra 1. Today we're going to continue 8.4. It's the second day of the lesson. Solve polynomial equations in factored form. So if you want to Google anything about this, the title, you should type in solve polynomial equations in factored form. Sometimes the problem is in YouTube, I found, they do the next part, which is 8.5 stuff, which doesn't make sense if you don't know 8.4 stuff. So what I'm going to do, off the suggestion of a couple of you guys, is I'm going to make a Zoom lesson today, and that's associated with the Google post that's I posted. So I haven't wrote that Google post, so the future me knows. As of me right now, I don't know what time that is. Okay, so I'll have a Zoom for you guys, so you could ask me questions and we could go over problems and stuff like that. Even do the homework together if you really want. All right. So 8.4, solve polynomial equations in factored form. So that's 2x squared plus 8x equals 0. So what this type of question does, combine both taking out the greatest common factor and solving the parentheses stuff. So we're going to start off with taking out the greatest common factor. So step one, and I'll post this in the Google Classroom also, is take out any greatest common factors, or common factors, I should say. So, and we call that when we take out a factor, like we take out a greatest common factor, that's why it's called factoring, because we're making the factors, visible. So when I do this, I have to first look at my numbers. So 2 and 8. The greatest common factor between 2 and 8 is 2. Now I got to look at my variables. Now, some of you guys had trouble with the last one. I think it was like an S or a W or something on the homework. So it's x squared and x. So this has two x's, and the other one has one x. So this one has two x's, this has one x. They share in common one x only. They don't share three x's. They share one x only. So they have an x out here. And I'm going to start the parenthesis, I should say. Very important to know. Every greatest common factor, you should leave it out here on the outside of the parenthesis. So you want to leave it outside the greatest common factor, outside of the parenthesis. Because remember, you're taking it out. You're not actually changing the number, so you're not actually removing it in terms of like completely gone. It's just outside the house, essentially. All right, so I'm going to divide both by 2x. 2 by 2 is 1. Don't need to write that. X squared divided by x is just x. Because x2 to the x1, you subtract the exponents. Plus, and let's go 2x here. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And the x1 over x1 would be x0. That's 1. That could completely disappear. I don't need to write that. Equal 0. Okay? So I just did the factoring. That was, I believe, the second part of the lesson. I'm going to put this in parentheses. And now I could solve for both x's. So I'm going to cut this in half and solve for both. So it's a combo of both lessons of yesterday. So 2x equals 0 and x plus 4 equals 0. Now I can use my trick, and I know, well, when it's plus 4, it's going to end up being the opposite. So x equals minus 4. And if you don't know the trick, that's the trick 4 on both sides. And notice it's always the opposite sign. So x minus 4. Here, I can't do the trick. It's not plus or minus. So I'm just going to divide 2 on both sides. Well, 0 divided by 2, or 0 divided by anything in the world, is still 0. So what does that imply? If I plug a 0 into the original equation, this will all become 0. Well, this would be 0, and this would be 0, and 0 plus 0 equals 0. That's good. X minus 4, that implies if I plug in a negative 4, it would be 0. Negative 4 squared is 16, positive 16, times 2, that's 36, plus 8 times negative 4. 8 times negative 4 is going to be negative 36. And 36 minus 36 does indeed equal 0. You don't need to always do the check, but I'm just explaining what this x equaling 0 and x equal negative 4 means. It means these numbers make it equal 0. All right. Now we're at a new situation. Now we look at this. Okay, there's things in common, but there's a big issue. I'll give you a second to think what it is. All right, the big issue, if you thought about it good, is that it's supposed to equal 0. Now, what's the problem right now? It does not equal 0. So what are we going to do? We're going to do a simple subtraction. So I'm going to do minus 15w minus 15w. Now, this is w squared and this is w. Because they're two different terms, w squared and w are different terms, you cannot combine them. So because you cannot combine this is 10w squared minus 15w equals, now this completely disappeared, so it's just 0 left over because I subtracted it. All right. Hey, wait a second. Now it looks like a problem I could solve. So maybe I don't know if I'll say step 0. Maybe I'll call this step 1 in the Google Drive or the Google Classroom post. But step 1 is to make sure it equals 0. If it doesn't, make it equal 0. All right. So I'm going to take out what's in common. So between these two, 10 and 15, the biggest constant in common seems to be 5. And w squared and w, this has 2 w's, the other one has 1 w. So how many fingers are up in common? It's just 1 finger up in common, so that's 1 w. Divided by 5w. So 10 divided by 5 is 2. W squared divided by w is w. Minus 5w. So 15 divided by 5 is 3. W divided by w is nothing, or 1, but we don't need to write that, equals 0. All right, time to split the line. 5w equals 0, and 2w minus 3 equals 0. For this one, I'm going to do plus 3 on both sides. So 2w equals 3. Then divided by 2 on both sides. W equals 3 over 2. And then 5w equals 0. Divided by 5, divided by 5, w equals 0. Because 0 divided by 5 is still 0. 0 divided by anything is still 0. So your two answers are 0 and 3.5. That covers basically what I want for this section. Yeah. I'm going to do one more, which I'll call it a challenge one. I'll post it as for fun in your homework. So give me a second. So this is just a challenging one. I don't know if I'll necessarily test you on this type of thing, but I just want to go over it just in case. If I do, your homework won't look like this, so don't sweat it if you're not getting it right away. So I'm going to factor out what's in common. It doesn't equal 0, so I don't need to do the solving at the end. I'm just going to factor out what's in common. So let's look at the numbers first. So 20 and 4. So 20 and 4, the greatest common factor is 4. X squared and x, so there's 2 x's on the left one and 1 x on the right one. They have 1 x in common, so it's just 1 x. And then 2 y's and 1 y, they have 1 y in common, so 1 y. And what I wanted to point out with this one is, first off, each variable is individual. So x's deals with the x's, while the y's deal with the y's. Okay? Like, it doesn't matter how many x's I have when I start counting the y's. It doesn't matter how many y's I have when I count the x's. The second thing I want you to notice, wait a second, Mr. Tobo, this greatest common factor is exactly the same as this. So what's going to happen? Well, first, let me take care of this. 4xy. 20 divided by 4 is 5. X squared divided by x. And let me rewrite this so I have a little bit more space. 4xy, parenthesis. So that's 5. X divided by x squared, or x squared divided by x, it's 2 minus 1 is just x. Y squared divided by y is just y. Minus, now this one, as I said earlier, it's exactly the same. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. X divided by x is 1. Y times 1 divided by 1 is 1. So that's technically 1 times 1 times 1. Well, if you divide and it's perfectly the same, all you're going to be left with is a 1. The reason I have to write the 1 this time versus all the other times I said, oh, it's a 1, you don't have to write it. I have to write the 1 here because it's the only thing that exists. So it's like that person that you hang out with because there's no one else to hang out with. That's 1 right here. So like when you have 2, when you have 10, you have x, you have 15xy, you rather hang out with that than 1. So 1 only exists when there's nothing left to take its place. Now, it did not equal 0, so I am done here, and I circle it. If it equals 0, we couldn't solve this right now because it has two variables, or two different variables, I should say. So we couldn't solve it if it equals 0. Overall, that's the end of my lesson today. Quicker video. I'm going to open a Zoom session. Again, my future self will post a Google Classroom to tell you what time and the code and all that. Come by, please, so I can give you some help. It's not mandatory. I'll say that. I know you guys are busy with all the other classes, so if you want to come by just to talk and vent, that's okay too. All right, just good luck, guys. Keep it up, all right? We'll get through this.